So, the translations are out for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 403, and let me just say that from what we get with this chapter, it seems to be the beginning of the end. Not just with All Might's character, not just with the fights with All For One and Tomura, but the end of the series as we know it, and you'll understand why that is the case. But first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my manga review of My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 403. And let me just start out by saying that there is a major reveal and revelation in this chapter. Not just when it comes to the characters that we see, but very much specifically the characters that we don't see, and potentially the return of a fan favorite character. So yeah, there's a lot that we really need to talk about when it comes to this chapter. So let's just dive right into it and talk about the chapter. And to start off, the title of the chapter is The End of an Era. And no, seriously, that's the name of the chapter. The End of an Era. And the end is actually going to lead into something else that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the video, but let's talk about how the chapter begins, which is weirdly enough with more flashback of All Might, and this was something that I was not expecting, especially with the reveal of who All Might's mother is. And we do not get a name for her in this chapter, but we do get to see what she looks like. And let me just say this, she looks very beautiful. She looks very cute. Like, besides anything that the internet is most likely going to do to her, I just really like the aesthetic design, especially with the idea that she looks like a lot of female characters that we've seen within the series, most specifically Nana Shimura, as well as in reference to Izuku Midoriya's mother, Inko, which really just ties into like the motherly themes of the characters like Nana and Inko, and once again All Might's mother, really showing that they are in a way connected, not necessarily by blood, but most likely from how they ended up becoming who they are later on down the line. And that is also going to be a running theme of this chapter about All Might realizing the path that he took and how his origins very much seems to be very mundane at the beginning, but that everything was leading to a specific point and that everything is going to end up the way that is going to be very beneficial, most likely to him and the heroes. Also, I would also like to bring up that we get a reference to a very, as well as I'm aware, well-known manga series in Japan by the name of Unpanman Man, and this is most likely the inspiration for why All Might wanted to be a hero so badly, which is most likely connecting to the idea of what made All For One want to be a villain. But yeah, the chapter beginning with a little bit more characterization for All Might's journey and the journey that he's been going on his entire life is something very interesting that I wasn't expecting, but it very much leads into what we're going to get later on in this chapter and immediately after this point, which is All Might just getting completely and utterly wrecked. Because as we predicted in the last chapter, what we saw wasn't actually an explosion, but more or less the releasing of light in anticipation of the explosion coming from the gauntlet, which luckily enough, All For One, or should I say unluckily enough, All For One is able to destroy with just some spice coming out of his arm. And how All Might sort of kind of predicted that this was something that All Might would do, bringing reference to a line that he said earlier about how heroes are dangerous when they are injured, and how he does not want All Might to die a heroic death, as we see later on in the chapter where he attempts to rip All Might in half. And we see how effective it was for him to actually steal Blood Curdle, because not only was he able to stop All Might from destroying and potentially killing him, but also because of Blood Curdle, he was able to paralyze All Might in this moment, making him completely helpless, and this is a state that he wanted to see, All Might's lowest point. And, you know, because they live in the world of My Hero Academia and All Might is in this moment right here, the obvious decision that many people want to make in this moment is to literally go and save the #1 hero. Because we see Gentle, who believes that now that Yue is flying, he can go and begin to help and save All Might. But unfortunately, All For One predicts this and blasts a huge hole in Yue, which apparently he was actually aiming for Gentle Criminal at this moment, as he gives a little bit of confirmation that he knows who Gentle Criminal is by name, and how he does not want anyone else getting involved in what he's about to do to All Might, where we get reintroduced to the fighter jets going and trying to aim a laser at him, but unfortunately All Might was able to dispose of them immediately, not necessarily because they were unable to actually hit him, but because there was most likely a hesitation because they came to a realization that, that is Star's idol. Are we sure we want to hit him? And that hesitation gave All For One enough time to just wipe his hand back as we get a very cool panel imagery of them yelling fire the lasers, but before they can even actually do it, we see that All For One wipes across the actual bubble with fire on it and destroys the aircrafts themselves. As well as we get to see Akbar here, and he's beginning to pray for the deaths of his comrades and the people that worked under him, as well as most likely praying for the safety of All Might. And from here, this is where Deku begins to lose his cool, as well as we get to pan over across the world of a whole bunch of people looking at what's happening to All Might, because we need to remember this is being recorded and live streamed all across the world. As we see people who are looking, who are concerned, we get to see some people who are praying, most likely for All Might's survival. We even cut over to Melissa, who's crying, believing that her uncle is going to die, as well as Gran Torino, confirmation that he is alive, crying at the idea that Toshinori is about to die. As All For One himself announces that this will mark the end of an era. Once again, the title coming back in this moment, most likely within the dialogue, as we just have Tsukachi and Deku thinking about the situation, yelling no. Deku's eyes are going crazy, very similarly to what he did when he saw Bakugo's quote-unquote dead body. And Deku comes to a realization that there's not much that he can do to actually stop All For One because he's handling with Tomura right now. So he's wanting someone, anyone, to come in and save All Might, as we get to see All For One trying to rip him in half. But before that even happens and the chapter begins to end, we get a huge boom explosion of light coming from atop of UA as we get the return of fan favorite character, King Explosion Murder God Dynamite. Bakugo is back! As we get the title of the chapter dropping at this moment, the end of an era and the beginning, as we get to see that the symbolism that we saw earlier in the chapter of All Might's journey and all the little sparks and lights that were trailing behind him have now been passed on in front of him to both Bakugo and Deku, as we see that they are kids. They're both holding the All Might card, as we get the beginning of them apparently noticing each other, as it's revealed, and the symbolism and the metaphor is that they are going to be the beginning of a new era, most likely of the two most powerful and quote-unquote greatest heroes as the chapter ends. And there's a lot that we really need to break down with this moment. Once again, this ties into the ideas of like passing on to the next generation. All Might has done his job to the best of his abilities, and now he has to put all of his faith and what he's built up into the next generation, into the next era, which is going to be representative of Bakugo and Deku, which makes sense because this is going to most likely tie into what we saw with Bakugo versus Deku after the provisional license exam, where Bakugo is going to be responsible for winning as well as saving by potentially defeating All For One and saving All Might, while Deku, who's primarily involved in saving people, is most likely going to save as well as defeat Tomura as his final opponent. And this is going to be very interesting to see whether or not All For One is going to be stopped by Bakugo, because this would mean that Bakugo's major antagonistic force will be All For One, which kind of makes sense with the naming scheme of Bakugo being Dynamite and All For One being defeated by another character named Might, so that makes some thematic sense there. But also, this is going to be used, and maybe the reasoning why Bakugo didn't die immediately towards the beginning of this arc, which is that this is going to be his pseudo-redemption, where he believed that he was the one that caused All Might to fall and for him to stop being a hero, and that he's the one reason that All Might failed. But now it's going to be a moment where he's going to sort of redeem himself, and that instead of him being the downfall of All Might, he's going to be the revitalization of what All Might represented, while also saving All Might himself. And this is some stuff that I've been very much looking forward to, and is the reasoning why I was kind of okay for Bakugo to eventually be revived, because it was going to build up to a moment like this. So I really can't wait to see what's going to be happening within the next chapter, with how good this chapter is, with how Horikoshi was able to handle Bakugo's return. And once again, there's some other interesting stuff that we can really talk about. For instance, how Bakugo's eyes seem to be very much akin to what's happening with Deku, and how this may connect to the second movie where he kind of had the power of One for All inside of him. So there may be a connection there, or it may just be because of the fact that he got his quirk awakening and his explosive power that was able to go on any part of his body in a huge, powerful attacks. Which may be the reasoning why he's able to glow as brightly as he is right now, because he may have a better understanding of his new cluster quirk as it affects his entire body. And how many people may believe that Bakugo will have no chance against All For One because he could barely stand his own against a quirkless Shigaraki for All. But people seem to fail to realize that Shigaraki for All is pretty much on the same power level as Shigaraki right now, and that Bakugo was probably the only character among that entire group that was able to do any damage to him. And All For One at this moment is probably weaker than that version of Shigaraki for one. As well as the fact that this ties into the idea that even All For One brings up that heroes who are injured are the most dangerous, and no other hero is as damaged as Bakugo is right now. And we saw what happened when heroes who are injured are able to continue fighting. We see what Endeavor was able to do against All For One the first time and killed him. We see what Tokoyami and Gigantomachia and Mount Lady were able to do to All For One when they are heavily injured. And we saw what All Might was able to do to All For One when he was also heavily injured. Basically, the more injured you are as a hero, the more dangerous you will be. So I do think that All Might will be saved by Bakugo, and All For One will potentially be defeated by Bakugo, and how this is going to tie into the ideas and themes when it comes to teamwork, and how these characters won't be working and fighting alone. They will be fighting in tandem, and how this will be the representation of them being the greatest heroes, and not just being one symbol of peace, but multiple symbols, because everyone could be a symbol, everyone can be a hero. So yeah, there is still probably a lot more that I can talk about in this chapter, but that's pretty much my review portion for this chapter. I really did enjoy the chapter. I really enjoyed just the reveal of Bakugo and what that can entail for the next chapter. I really even enjoyed how it seems as if everything was going to go in despair, and how All For One seems to be more of a threat just for the reveal to pretty much show, oh yeah, no, we still have Bakugo. As well as just the beginning part of this chapter really just showing what All Might's journey is going to eventually lead into, with the realization that his story is about him really realizing what it means to be a hero, and eventually allowing his will and his ideals to be passed on to the next generation, who will be able to apply them better than he was able to at this moment. Also, something else that I completely lost my mind is that we got two different color pages or color spreads. One where we get to see the reveal of what the armored All Might suit looks like, fully colored. It's black with gold accents, as well as we get to see that that is most likely a representation of Nana Shimura's suit, her hero costume, which is very similar, as well as we get to see Deku in his full hero costume with all of its coloring, and how they all seem to have a little bit of like white in their hair, most likely showing a connection between all of them, as well as the cover of Shonen Jump just being Deku looking awesome. So yeah, that's something that I totally forgot to bring up, and I'm glad that I remembered it before I ended this video. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about the chapter. And let me ask you this, what did you think of the chapter? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? What was your favorite part? And are you happy that Bakugo has returned? Leave your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!